100-Year Flood, the historical record. Brought to you by North Pacific Cellular and Fax, Bar Locker Insurance, Monterey Federal Credit Union, Rainbow Carpet One, and Salinas Valley Memorial Hospital. This is a KCBA News Special Report.
This was the scene as the 1-2 punch of rain and runoff pummeled the Central Coast. The rain pushed area rivers up and over flood stage. Thousands of people living along the Carmel, Salinas, and Pajaro rivers were forced to leave their homes. The Monterey Peninsula became Monterey Island as swollen rivers washed away bridges and roads linking it to the rest of the state. Hello. Thanks for joining us. The floods of '95 have now eclipsed the Loma Prieta earthquake as the costliest disaster ever to strike the Central Coast. Over the next half hour, you will see dramatic images of the floods as chronicled by KCBA News crews. Join us for this KCBA News special, 100-Year Flood, the historical record.
The 100-Year Flood, a comprehensive look at the floods of '95 and their impact on California's Central Coast. Here now, your host, Carmine Gallo.
There's an old saying, history repeats itself. That's one of the problems with history. Floods are nothing new to the Central Coast. We may not remember them because they happened so long ago, but they happen. And some people believe that if we don't learn from them, Mother Nature will come back to bite us again.
All the years, all the rain we've had, what makes this year any different than any other?
What went on? Why did local rivers burst their banks in March of '95? The floods caused hundreds of millions of dollars in damage and left thousands of people homeless. Local experts blame two factors, Mother Nature and human error. Let's begin by talking about that which we cannot control, rain.
The floods of 1995 followed two successive high rainfall events. The high rainfall event of January saturated the ground, and then the high rainfall event of March caused excess runoff. If we had gotten only one event of this magnitude, we would have had substantially less flooding than we had this time.
Along some rivers, like the Pajaro, Curry says the means of controlling the river were inadequate.
The levee broke on the Pajaro River because the levee was built too low. The levee was built based upon a very short period of record of floods. It was designed in the 40s and built in the 40s, and the record started in 1938, so they didn't know how high the river would get. They guessed, and they guessed wrong.
Local historians say the Central Coast has been hit by even worse floods, but there were fewer people around to feel the damage.
Since 1850, since our records really are good, we probably had 10 good floods right where we're standing right now. Okay, so, you know, this is nothing new. I think our problem is that we forget. We have very short-term disaster memories. I think the big difference is that we have developed a lot of the land that heretofore was land that just got flooded periodically. There's more of it, there's more building.
Leiden believes that when the river's behavior is put in a larger historical perspective, the rivers become more predictable.
Think about rivers this way. Rivers are like football players. The Salinas River and the Pajaro River are linemen. They're strong, broad-shouldered, they move slowly, but they can really do a lot of damage, but it's heavy, slow stuff. The Carmel River and the San Lorenzo rivers are quick rivers. They come up fast and they go down fast, and they're slashers. They cut through, they do a lot of damage, but then they go away quickly.
Leiden says if rivers are like football players, then it pays to study the playbook, so next time we're better prepared.
I think before, people were much more tuned to the natural rhythm of things. I think that people paid a lot more attention to when it rained. I think people were a lot more aware. I think we've become less aware. Maybe, if nothing else, we will have learned to pay a little more attention to the natural surrounding and not to be so surprised when it rains.
People who learned a tough lesson are those who live along the Carmel River. Heidi Linkenbach has that story.
On Friday, March 10th, exactly 2 months after the Carmel River first flooded their homes, residents of an area of Carmel Valley known as Rosie's Bridge watched as the rain-fed river swelled in its banks. In a pouring down rain, folks armed with shovels formed an assembly line and started filling sandbags as quickly as they could, trying to hold back the water. But time was not on their side. By noon, the sandbags were giving way to the bulging Carmel River. Are you giving up on this area right here?
Absolutely. The sandbags are not going to do it. This is a much bigger flood than January.
Within minutes, the river was pouring into homes along its banks, taking with it anything that wasn't tied down. The area known simply as Rosie's Bridge was underwater again, and this time the damage was even more widespread. This is something residents of this area hope they'd never see again, the raging Carmel River rushing through their homes. And though they've been through it before, they weren't prepared for it the second time. Is it tough to see this again twice in exactly 2 months?
Yeah, it's real tough. I mean, I don't think there's anything they could do. Sandbagging wouldn't have helped the side of the river over there. But what do you do?
What can you say? Devastation, I don't know. It's just devastating. It's unbelievable.
Further downstream, county work crews breached a levee, allowing the river to flow into nearby artichoke fields. By nightfall, water was filling the barnyard and the Crossroads shopping centers and the nearby business district. Eventually, it flowed down the streets and into homes in the Mission Fields area.
Water was almost neck deep. Strong current from the water coming across the highway. A lot of debris.
But Mission Fields wasn't the only casualty that night. As the sun came up the next day, something was missing. Overnight, raging waters tore apart the Highway 1 bridge over the Carmel River. A 120-foot chunk of the bridge collapsed, disappearing into the muddy brown waters. Water, power, and sewer lines were taken down with it, leaving thousands of residents south of the Highway 1 bridge stranded and without services. Almost as quickly as the bridge disappeared, work crews started to build a temporary structure known as a Bailey Bridge. Damage to homes, businesses, and property in the Carmel and Carmel Valley areas alone is estimated in the tens of millions of dollars.
We've lost everything. Everything. This is all our furniture, and you can see the mud on it and stuff. There's not much we can save.
Within days, crews bridged the gap over the Carmel River on Highway 1. To many residents, this roadway symbolizes the beginning of the long road to recovery that lies ahead. When we come back, we'll see how Santa Cruz County fared in the 100-year flood.
The Pajaro River runs through 4 counties. It dumps into the Pacific Ocean west of Watsonville. It doesn't look like much of a threat now. But on Saturday, March 11th, the levee broke, flooding much of the town of Pajaro. In fact, that weekend in Santa Cruz County, thousands of people got caught by surprise.
It was swift and overwhelming. The raging San Lorenzo River swamped over 50 homes. But spirits in Felton Grove still flowed freely.
Should you guys be like maybe moving stuff out or anything?
But we don't want to miss out on all this excitement.
Well, I have to go get my mother now. You gonna like pick her up on your air mattress? I guess so.
But Friday, March 10th would be a long, unforgettable day. Rain-swollen mountain streams kept rushing downhill into bigger rivers. And at nightfall came another warning.
Well, Liz, the latest is this. The disaster wheel keeps spinning through Santa Cruz County, and it's scheduled to roll through the Pajaro Valley. The latest hot spot, the Pajaro River.
The river was at 31.9, and flood stage is 32, so it's only a 1/10 of an inch below flood stage right now.
What about the residents? Are they told to evacuate?
We've been told we're evacuating people now. It's a mandatory evacuation put out by the Sheriff's Department.
We need you to leave the house and go to the high school because the water's coming over. Okay? Everybody? Everybody.
That's 3,000 evacuees from Pajaro and Watsonville, and at 1 in the morning, the shelter started filling up, the waters started creeping up, and those at the command center thought they heard good news.
The latest word is that the water level has dropped a little bit. I believe now it's at 32.4 feet, and if it gets down to about 28 feet, then we will allow people to go back to their homes.
But those hopes washed away as the Pajaro River busted its banks where few expected it to happen, 1 mile upstream. By 3:30 in the morning, they were on the brink of chaos. The floodwaters were more than a mile away from the river. The reports of some cars floating away and strike crews from outside both counties were called in to help. Evacuees began to straggle out, some of them just ahead of the floodwaters, nearly all of them wearing the mask of shock. Weary and shaken, many had no time to grab their shoes.
We're going to take them past the flood and drop them off. We're trying to get a bus in to pick them up.
Did anybody tell you this might happen?
Oh, yeah, like around 11, but we didn't think it was going to be that much, you know.
Federal, state, and local crews came to the rescue. Boats and fire engines were the only way out. What were they floating down on?
They were on an aluminum boat, but there's like thousands of 55-gallon plastic drums all over the place, so there was no way they would have made it out. The cars are underwater, and it's hard to tell how deep it is. You know, it's dangerous to drive through any deep areas.
And as dawn broke, a helicopter pilot rescued a 92-year-old man. The man was trapped for hours on top of a car surrounded by the torrential waters. Hours later, the world got a clear look at the devastation. The waters will recede, but the memories of the great flood will likely endure. But there was little rest for the rescue crews. To the south, troubled waters overran the Salinas River as well. Rose Dean brings us that story.
In both the Santa Lucia Range and the Gabilan Range, so much water came out of the sky so fast that all of the small tributaries and larger tributaries like the Arroyo Seco that feed into the Salinas River Basin were just totally maxed out very, very quickly.
And where did the excess water go? Anywhere it wanted to. The Salinas River turned local fields into lakes, becoming an uninvited and unwanted guest in many homes. The whole mess started Friday, March 10th. South Monterey County communities got hit first. Sporadic flooding on Highway 101 caused havoc for drivers, slowing down traffic to a crawl. During the day, 36 people were evacuated from the Arroyo Seco River. By nightfall, evacuation started in Gonzales. On Saturday, the river imperiled Spreckles, the water inundating the floodplain. Residents were told to expect to evacuate, but having heard that for years, many took it in stride.
But we have been talking to people and we're keeping ourselves informed, and just going to kind of ride it out and see what happens.
By Sunday, water was everywhere. Los Palmas residents on the south end of the Salinas River sandbagged their community. In Spreckles, water reached the famous tree-lined boulevard. Water even overtook Highway 68, severing the main artery between Salinas and Monterey. The National Guard was called in to ferry people across the submerged highway, which delighted some people. What's not fun about it?
Well, I kind of want to get home and see my pets and do some stuff at home. I don't want to be stranded here the whole time.
What's fun about it?
Well, I get to ride in an army truck.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But it was Castroville that bore the mighty brunt of the floods. Entire neighborhoods were evacuated as the waters continued their assault. And while there was water everywhere, there was not a drop to drink. For several days, the threat of sewage contamination forced residents to rely on bottled water for drinking, cooking, and bathing. But when they were allowed to return home, they didn't let the overwhelming disaster get them down.
Could be a dead city, which ain't no dead city.
Now that the Salinas River is slowly turning back to normal, water experts say there's a lesson to be learned from the floods of '95. Never underestimate the power of a river, especially if you're living in the flood zone.
And when a natural event like this occurs, then we're all upset, obviously. You know, we've got homes that are wiped out, we've got people that are displaced, we've got fields that are no more, and we're all upset and we're all complaining. The fact we have to remember is, you know, we have very little control over an event like this, and there will be other events like this in the future. There definitely will be.
Agriculture is, of course, the biggest industry in the Salinas Valley, and the flood hit it hard. Lawrence Grothier reports.
When the Salinas River could no longer hold runoff from relentless rain, the first ground flooded was fertile farmland along the valley floor. Estimates are that 75,000 acres were inundated, about 1/4 of the valley's cultivated acreage. The value of crops swept away or ruined by the flood, $200 million, and that doesn't begin to account for damage done to property and equipment.
We might have had flooding like this in the past, but of course we didn't have the type of agriculture or the populations we have here now. So this is obviously the most serious thing that has happened to this county. And you know, we've had freezes and we've had droughts, but none of them have reached this magnitude.
In the Pajaro Valley, the devastation is comparably complete. 3,000 acres were submerged when the Southside River levee broke there. Worst off, strawberry growers, who were just weeks away from the start of their season and a chance to recoup their investment.
The real impact here is you've got the growers who have lost their crops and damage to their property, and you have all these farm employees who are losing wages. And a lot of these farm employees have lost their homes also because they live in the Pajaro Valley.
Virtually no commodities spared the effects of the high water. Artichokes, broccoli, cauliflower, and down through the alphabet, the floods of '95 spell heartache for growers in the heart of California. Still ahead on the 100-year flood, a look at good neighbors who put themselves in harm's way and became hometown heroes.
When rain-swollen rivers hit flood stage, often the first casualties are roads and bridges. The floods of '95 were no exception. In fact, for more than a day, the Monterey Peninsula was virtually cut off from the rest of the state.
Highway 1 flooded out, 68 was underwater, and the Highway 1 bridge over the Carmel River had been washed away. So people on the Monterey Peninsula found themselves surrounded by water, and the only way out was up.
Highway 68 was closed. We tried to come around Del Reyes, and that was closed. There was no way into Salinas. And so this was our only other option, was to fly out of Monterey and into Salinas.
Flying was really the only option. People who found themselves stuck on the peninsula all just wanted to get home, and many of them ended up here at Del Monte Aviation, and they ended up waiting behind a lot of other people who had the same idea.
It's been totally crazy around here. We've had all kinds of flights going from Monterey to San Jose to Oakland, Stockton, San Francisco, just all kinds of people coming in at the last minute, just in a hurry just to get out of here, to go back to work or to go back to school.
I'm trying to get up to San Jose to head up to San Francisco. I just got in from Cleveland, and we're stranded.
Making a big trip to Salinas.
All right.
Flying out got a lot of people out, but for many who got stuck on what became an island, the Monterey-Salinas Highway was the first road to bridge the peninsula to the outside world once those floodwaters receded.
Well, I did drive in this morning. Took 2.5 hours, but I'm trying to get home now.
Home was a place many people longed for, and they eventually got there. It just took them a lot longer than they ever expected. Disasters often bring out the best in people. The 95 floods were no exception. Pauline Odegaard reports.
This time it was very depressing, very emotionally depressing. The first time we were able to bounce back at it. The second time my wife broke down. She just couldn't hack it anymore. So she's better now.
Stories like that are all too common for Central Coast flood victims. So many people lost so much. But that sense of loss is exactly what's uniting communities. People are lending helping hands to strangers. Hundreds of volunteers did what they could to hold back the raging rivers. And the military was out in force to do what it could to make people's lives a little bit easier.
Oh, I think it's wonderful. They had it fixed up in no time flat. Yeah, and I'm sure glad they're around here today.
Even though flood victims are overwhelmed by their losses, their neighbors are also in their thoughts.
I just had a 60th birthday, and believe me, it's hard to think of starting over again. But then there are a lot of people around here a lot older than I am, and they're in the same boat.
Rescue workers braved the relentless waters to save what they could. One brave Watsonville firefighter rescued a puppy from the Pajaro River. As this soggy puppy dried out, so did many of the flood-ravaged areas. The road to recovery is a long one, but with people pulling together, it's sure to be made easier. The 100-year flood will continue with a final thought in just a moment.
Over the last several years, the people who live on the Central Coast have had to deal with quakes and with floods. It's hard to predict what hand Mother Nature will deal next, but you can bet on this. The people who live here will pull together, as they always have, with the courage to face adversity and with faith in the future. At KCBA, we share that faith, and we are proud to be your neighbors on the Central Coast. Thanks for joining us.